I'm Nick Palmisano, and this is the Bad News Network. We've got another doozy on our hands, folks. Let's start with the most important story of the day. Our government is inept, and I mean completely inept. The posturing has reached new levels. President Trump and Nancy Pelosi are just like breaking out the plumage. There's no real quality discussion right now. It's just two people looking at each other yelling, "I am a peacock! You gotta let me fly!" The president opened the week up by offering to extend Dreamer protection for another couple of years in exchange for a border wall. Pelosi called this an immediate non-starter. So then nothing for, the rest of the week, until yesterday. The Senate finally tried to do something. They looked at themselves in the mirror hard and said, f it. It's been a month. Maybe we should try to do our jobs or, whatever. Both the Democrats and the Republicans proposed a bill to reopen the government. Unfortunately, the Republican bill was defeated 50-47 and the Democratic bill was defeated 52-44. In the first attempt, 2 Democrats jumped over to the Republican side to try to get this done. In the second attempt, 6 Republicans jumped over to the Democratic side. Props to those 8 people and literally no one else, because those people are the only people that give a fuck about Homeland Security, the Coast Guard, or running a reasonable government. This remains the dumbest shutdown in history. Building the wall is not going to solve our border security issue, but it's also not the worst investment we've ever made. There's merit to both sides of the argument, but rather than compromise, both sides are willing to just watch the world burn in order to win. If you're pushing back on this, cool. But just to be clear, in the entire 34 days of this shutdown, these folks have had 3 meetings and written 4 snarky letters. And that's pretty much the entirety of their effort to solve this problem. And just yesterday, the Senate finally says, hey, maybe we should give this a shot. I mean, LaGuardia Airport had to shut down because they can't pay personnel to make sure it's safe. The Coast Guard hasn't been paid in a month. Think about your own jobs, whatever they are. Would you let this happen? If you're a cop and shit hits the fan, you stay at work until it's done. If you're a firefighter putting out a fire, but it's not your shift anymore, guess what doesn't happen? You don't leave and let the house burn down. Nurses stay late when shifts get crazy. When the store is slammed, people in retail work extra hours. Now imagine that literally the entire country is counting on you, and 800,000 people have not been paid because of you. Wouldn't you be working your motherfucking ass off trying to solve the problem? Look, I know how these things go. I've been in litigation a couple of times. Once when I worked for a Fortune 100 company and we were in a lawsuit, and another time a couple years ago when we had a supplier dispute. And in those situations, which are 100% ticky-tack nonsense compared to the entire federal government, I was sending like 4 letters a day. We were having conference calls. It was non-stop effort. It was all-consuming, and I worked tirelessly, non-stop, to see this thing to its rightful conclusion so it could be done, as did the folks on the other side. And I know I've beaten this to death, but I'm gonna keep beating it. When my mechanic falls behind, he stays late because he doesn't want to let customers down. When our web developer falls behind, he and his people stay late because they don't want to let their customers down. When we fall behind, we stay in this place until 2, 3, 4 in the morning just to make sure we don't let our customers down. But when Congress and the President reach an impasse, we get 3 meetings and 4 snarky letters and that's it? Seriously? And then we have McConnell saying that he's not going to allow a vote in the Senate on something that Trump might veto. Why? If you don't believe in it, that's one thing. If you think that the bill is going to hurt the country, then by all means, don't allow a vote. But you can't fear a veto. There's a process. Pass the bill and then send it to the president. If he vetoes it, guess what? You are a co-equal branch of the government and you can override his veto with a supermajority. And by the way, that would put pressure on the president to actually sign something because it would fall squarely in his court. But back to President Trump and Speaker Pelosi. The people on the extremes of both sides are lionizing these two. Trump's a badass and he won't back down to Pelosi. He just says what he thinks. Then we have the memes of Pelosi walking out of the White House smirking, dropping the shades on like she's some kind of tough girl from a movie walking away from an explosion. You know what? If the Constitution is on the line, don't back down. If there's a bill on the table that's gonna cripple the country, don't back down. But if the two of you can't come to some consensus on this wall nonsense that everybody knows is not going to have a major impact on the country either way, then neither of you should be in office and no one should vote for either of you ever again. Well, thank God we got the dumbest story of the week out of the way. Oh wait, there's a dumber story. An altercation between a bunch of Covington Catholic high school kids and a Native American elder made headlines this week. A short clip surfaced of Native American elder Nathan Phillips banging a drum in front of a bunch of sneering kids wearing MAGA hats. A short clip surfaced of Native American elder Nathan Phillips, allegedly a Vietnam veteran, being sneered at by a bunch of kids wearing MAGA hats. The clip had people from all political persuasions fired up. There were calls for the kid to get expelled. People wanted to dox him. They threatened the school. They threatened his life. They threatened his family. It got incredibly hysterical. I'll fully admit that sitting at home, drinking wine, shitposting on Twitter, I said, if I had acted like that, my mom would have murdered me. The problem is that the clip was taken totally out of context. Shortly thereafter, a longer video that was about 1 hour and 45 minutes, as well as a bunch of shorter accompanying videos, came out and told a series of very different stories. After kicking myself because I assumed that because every major news network reported it as such, it must be true, I took the time to watch every minute of every video at least twice so that I had a good understanding of what actually transpired. Now I want to clarify, once the longer videos came out, there were a lot of people that instantly started painting these kids as saints that had done nothing wrong. I didn't really see that either. Here's what I saw. There were 4 groups involved and they all did something wrong. So here's my breakdown of what happened. Feel free to disagree. Let's start with the Black Hebrew Israelites. If that isn't a boy band name, I don't know what is. Anyway, they're a weird religious group that's kind of like the black version of Westboro Baptist Church, but not quite as evil. I'm just gonna read this bit because it's a little confusing. They believe that they are the true descendants of the house of Israel and that white people are the descendants of Esau, the twin of Jacob, while Native Americans are the descendants of Gad. Naturally, they are the chosen ones and everyone else is God's little bitch. Anyway, they were heckling these kids pretty badly, calling them racists, bigots, crackers, incest kids, and a host of homophobic slurs we're not going to repeat here. They then targeted the black Covington Catholic students by making an allusion to the movie Get Out, saying that their friends were going to harvest their organs. Real sweet people. Then we had the kids. In the aftermath of this event, the kids are pretending that they're pure as the driven snow, they've never done anything wrong in their entire lives, and they like to do a lot of silent prayer hoping that situations are going to resolve. Anyway, right before the event, there was a video of them catcalling a bunch of girls walking by. Without going into too much detail about it, it was basically like watching the Gillette commercial, except there wasn't a big strong man to walk up and go, "Hey man, that's not all right." Then during the actual incident, when Nathan Phillips approached them playing the drum, they started doing the tomahawk chant as if they were at a Chiefs game. I'm not an expert on racism, but that's probably not the way to go. By the way, speaking of the Chiefs, go Patriots. Anyway, as Mr. Phillips walked through the group of kids, most of them parted ways, until of course they got to the famous smirking kid, Nick Sandeman. Now, nothing says that he has to move. Now, I'll say first and foremost, I have no idea what was actually going through the kid's head. But what I saw was not him sitting there in silent prayer as he claimed, nor did I see somebody that was necessarily overtly racist or anything like that. I saw the fuck you expression. It's the expression that I've had many times in my life when some drunk asshole at a bar who won't go away walks up to you and tells you he's going to hit you. That's the smirk I get. I think he's a teenage idiot, young, dumb, and full of testosterone. I think he was big manning it for all of his friends. He was going to brag about this later, and they were all going to giggle about it on the school bus, but unfortunately it ended up as national news. After all, people go to protests for a fight, not to be heard. Then there are the chaperones. This was supposed to be a pro-life event. Cool. What do MAGA hats have to do with that? Now, these kids have freedom of expression, of course, and the MAGA hat doesn't bother me. Wear whatever you want. But if you're on a school-funded and chaperoned trip representing a Catholic high school trying to impose your point of view about the morality of abortion, maybe the best way to do that isn't by wearing a hat that represents a man that was banging a porn star while his third wife was pregnant, who he was banging while he was married to his second wife, who he was banging while he was married to his first wife. I also know that not all Covington Catholic high school students are Republican. So again, why was this appropriate dress if you were trying to have a united front against abortion? Also, why did the chaperones leave the kids in a position where they could be harassed for that long? Move them. And if you can't move them, at least put yourself between the two groups. When Phillips approached them, he should have walked into an adult who could then make adult decisions. Not some teenager hopped up on adrenaline and backed by a mob of his friends cheering. And finally, there's Nathan Phillips, and I want to read his quote because I want to make sure that I get this right. "There was a moment I realized I've put myself between beast and prey, and I stood in between them, and so they needed their pounds of flesh, and they were looking at me for that." You know, at first I thought he misjudged this situation, but the more that I learn about the guy, I just think he's an attention-seeking liar. Phillips has claimed for years that he's a Vietnam veteran and that he was a Marine Recon Ranger. Those last three words make veterans everywhere instantly stand on edge. Recon Rangers do exist. I went to Ranger school with a couple of guys that ended up being just that. But even they wouldn't have called themselves that. They simply would have referred to themselves as Marine Recon. It was fishy enough that former SEAL Don Shipley requested his records and did a quick analysis 2 days ago. And guess what? He's not a Vietnam veteran. He's not recon, and he is not a ranger. What he is a refrigerator repairman. They went AWOL 3 times. I mean, he wasn't even a water dog. Water dog! So when you watch the full video, this Stolen Valor veteran walks up to a group of fired up kids who have been getting yelled at for 2 hours and then bangs a drum in their face and then plays the victim. So in short, the news is currently completely consumed by the fact that a bunch of teenage boys with piss poor supervision were approached by a Stolen Valor asshole after getting heckled by racist, homophobic assholes for 2 hours, but before they were misogynistic assholes to a group of women, and when that happened, they smirked menacingly at them. Holy shit! I am so glad we got to the bottom of this one! Why do we care? Why do any of us care? Let's say these kids were totally racist assholes. And they may be, even though the evidence doesn't really point to that. They're not our kids. Do any of us really think we're gonna fix anything by doxing these kids? It's hard enough to raise your own kids and get them to make good decisions without worried about some kids in Kentucky you don't know and will never meet. Or is the goal here just to punish people and ruin the lives of anybody we don't know? Because I have to tell you, as bad as the 3 mobs were to each other that day, nothing trumps the social media mob that has ripped this thing to shreds. What a waste of time and energy. Let's all just go pet a dog or something. Oh crap, I double ranted, didn't I? I try to only rant once per show, so I'm gonna speed this thing up. In other Trump news, the president says he plans on giving the State of the Union address, but then Pelosi said he can't, so then he said, okay, I won't. Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez is really good at Twitter, and I guess that makes her a leader or something. She also said that climate change is this generation's World War II, and we're all gonna die in 12 years. For those of you playing Trump campaign indictment bingo at home, this week's name is Roger Stone. Stone, a political consultant, has been brought up on 7 counts, including obstruction, making false statements, witness tampering, and just generally being an asshole. According to a new national poll, 73% of all Americans think that climate change is a major issue. 67% of all Americans think that man is the primary cause. But only 23% of those people are willing to spend $10 or more to fix it every month. So in short, the climate is important, but not as important as Netflix. In UK news, Theresa May is getting her ass kicked about a no Brexit deal because it's going to leave them with a situation where there is a hard border between Ireland and Northern Ireland. For those of you that haven't been following this situation closely, Ireland and Northern Ireland have had a 20-year lasting peace. As Northern Ireland is part of the UK and Ireland is part of the EU, post-Brexit there's going to be a need for a hard border between the two with passport controls. Many are worried that such a border would create a resurgence of violence, while many more of us are worried about the Bono songs that will come out as a result of that violence. The presidential race is heating up. Thus far, the Republican National Convention has passed a resolution that said they will not back up anyone financially that primaries against the president. That's going to make running against Trump as a Republican virtually impossible. Meanwhile, the Democrats have announced that the mayor of the 4th largest town in Indiana is going to run, as well as the former mayor of San Antonio, as well as a pro-Assad Democrat from Hawaii, Kamala Harris, and Elizabeth Warren. Oh, and I almost forgot. There's a lot of speculation that Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden are going to run again.
Looks like I picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue.
The oldest nun alive, Sister Cecilia Rozek, died this week at the age of 110. The sister was a Polish nun who risked her life to protect Jews from the Nazis during World War II. One of the Jews that she saved was prolific writer Abba Kovner. Kovner would go on to testify at the trial of war criminal Adolf Eichmann. The world is not as good without you, sister. Venezuela is in the final death throes of socialism as Venezuelan troops have actually fired at protesters in a blatant attempt to keep Maduro in power. President Trump took bold action and went to Twitter to say, "The citizens of Venezuela have suffered for too long at the hands of the illegitimate Maduro regime. Today I have officially recognized the President of the Venezuelan National Assembly, Juan Guaido, as the interim President of Venezuela. This is a big deal and it's the most aggressive foreign policy the President has made to date." His comments drew immediate rebukes from both Russia and China, which has me thinking that we're probably moving in the right direction on this one. The President stated that all options are on the table. This immediately made Democrats uneasy about the possibility of another war, while simultaneously exciting Army Rangers everywhere who are fired up about the possibility of getting a mustard stain. And finally, in Florida Man news, Brian Dwayne Stewart, who looks like a combination of Thor and Patrick Swayze, told his neighbor he was going to kill him with kindness before writing the word kindness on a machete and attacking him. His attack resulted only in a cut on his neighbor's hand, which made it a little anticlimactic, but also very Florida. I'm torn on this story. I like puns, but I also dislike attempted murder. And with that, I'm Nick Palmisano, and this is the Bad News Network. Our news is at least as bad as the news you're getting already, and go Patriots!